going back to the beginning, how did your journey in starting out, in ophthalmology and your practice, how did that start out?
Yeah. I think to tell the story of the clinic, we've got to tell the story of the last 30 years before that. So the family business is running eye clinics and eye hospitals. Predominantly, that was mostly based in the Middle East, in Syria particularly, and with the advent of the Syrian civil war that broke out in 2011, well, that changed plans, and therefore Syria wasn't really a viable option from an economical, security, and just general lifestyle point of view. So family moved back to London. I was here at the time doing my master's in ophthalmology. So it was just right after med school. What was supposed to be a month-long break from Syria with my parents over turned into basically what is now counting 13 years. And so very quickly within that first year of sort of the family realizing, okay, we're staying in the UK, we're not going back to Syria. That's when we kind of on autopilot shifted into what we do best, which is setting up eye clinics, eye hospitals, and moving forward. And that's where the concept of the clinic came in. I, at the time, was heavily involved in my NHS practice, and also I was running a medical device innovation startup I say on the side, but in terms of hours committed, it was pretty much one for one with the NHS work. So in about December 2017, is when we sort of took over the clinic, got the keys. Took us about 2-3 months to renovate it, reasonably quick, to be honest. And by March 2018, we were open. Now, I still had my full-time commitment at the time. And then as the clinic started to grow, we realized, what manager we've got in place is fantastic, but is not potentially suited for the direction we want to take the clinic in. So there was a change of management, and that's where I came in. And that was 2019. And basically, I've been de facto manager plus, as it is in a small company, you wear multiple hats. So that became how I got involved in the clinic.
And I guess I want to hear about the clinic side. What do you believe sets your clinic apart from other private practices in London, both in terms of patient care and medical outcomes?
Yeah, so multiple things actually, both from the clinical excellence side and sort of the patient experience side. I'll start off with the clinical. So with our background in innovation, that allowed us to get in on the ground floor in terms of relationships with a lot of very interesting treatments coming through the pipeline. From my days in sort of startup world, and that eventually moved to the US, we were all startup founders in the trenches at the same time. So, there's that common pain point that builds this camaraderie, so to say. And I maintain those relationships. So when these companies did in fact come to receiving their, CE marking, MHRA approvals and whatnot, I was in a unique position to be first adopter. And that's been a policy of the clinic. So about 1/5 of our treatments that we offer are exclusive to us, as in nobody else in the nation provides those particular treatments, which has been a very unique selling point on one aspect. That's point number one. Point number two, from a clinical side point of view, my lead clinician is one of those older school consultants who are eye consultants and good at every aspect of it. Sort of modern training for ophthalmologists here in the UK, you kind of do a lot of surface things across the board, and then you're encouraged to subspecialize in a particular part of the cornea, or part of the eye, excuse me. Now that's fantastic in terms of your training is hyper-focused, but in a, let's say, private practice setting, you have to the best of your ability, manage most of the problems going on. Even if, for example, let's say, you're doing a lens procedure and you get a complication. Well, instead of getting a retinal surgeon to come in and fix it, if you can do it there and then, that's a huge bonus. So having that ability to deal with whatever's thrown your way was really, really helpful, and allowed us to say yes to a lot of patients and continue to do so. And very quickly, we're now becoming a center where if you've got a complicated case that you're not quite sure to manage, don't want to manage, or not, whatever the reason is, we become that center to take you on board. So that's been a very helpful niche to fill, both nationally and internationally now. So that's that. Then when you come to sort of the patient journey side of it, two main points. Offering same-day appointments is a huge bonus. We're well versed in dealing with high volume double book clinics and just managing that situation, which allows us to, first of all, bring in patients, boost revenue from the business side point of view, but it also builds that relationship with patients, because most of the, let's call them emergency appointments, same-day appointments, do tend to come back for any other eye problem they're having, or let's say they've been considering laser eye surgery for some time. Well, now they've got that existing relationship to have that conversation, which brings me then to the second point. About 9 months ago, we transitioned the clinic to, this may sound a little bit as in you should be doing this in the first place, but it became a core focus of how the clinic runs, in that focus on the patient journey and not on the treatment specifics they need. Now, you do the treatments and that part and parcel of the patient journey, but it's from point of the patient being a person at home Googling an eye problem all the way through to discharge after treatment. There's about 15, 16 different touch points. And so mapping that and assigning responsibility and continuity and having a good follow-up structure allowed us to really, put ourselves in the patient's shoes, or particularly the private patient shoes, be able to deliver a service that is, first of all, worthy of the price tag and worthy of the location, and also what the expectation is.
How important is your referral network in growing your medical practice? And what advice would you give to other specialists trying to, build trust amongst their peers and GP practices?
Yeah. So I get asked this question a lot because I do a lot of informal training for the doctors who use the practice as well. Now, they come in, varied shapes and forms, in that you've got your more established consultants, you've got your newly appointed consultants who are just now starting. We like to do a mix. So find a few of, very, how do I put it, up and coming stars, let's call it, and mix that in with your more established consultants. So to answer your question, how important is the referral network? It's key. It's one of multiple different parallels that a business has to have to basically get patient referrals. So, you've got your digital marketing. You've got your word of mouth referral. You've got your more traditional print-based article opinion, method of marketing. And then you've got your referral network. Now, the referral networks are fantastic because what they already do is pre-qualify the patient, first of all. You already have overcome a trust barrier from the very beginning because they're being referred to you by somebody they trust. So in terms of director path for treatment, referrals require a lot less nurturing than a cold lead, for example, off a meta ad. So it's key, and it's always important to diversify because, while the ophthalmic private market, it's a market in its own right, and it experiences ups and downs and seasonality changes and things like that. And so from a business point of view, you want to be able to have enough patients coming through the door to boost your peaks, but minimize your troughs.
Healthcare marketing is one of the most regulated spaces. How do you navigate promoting your services while still stay compliant with, GMC and ASA guidelines?
Yeah. So it's key to remember that there's regulations and then there's guidelines. One is you have got to do it. The other is it's best to abide by. But if you don't, it's absolutely fine, provided you've got a justifiable medical reason why to do so. So it's really important to differentiate the two. A lot of people will get too bogged down on if the guidelines only say this and this is the only thing I'm treating. That's fine, but those don't account for every single case study presented. And sometimes you do have to think a little bit outside of the box to manage your patient treatment. In terms of process, so what helped us with navigating this is, okay, first of all, let's say we're launching a new campaign or we're looking to introduce a new treatment or something like that. There's always multiple considerations. There's sort of the marketplace business strategy consideration, the marketing strategy consideration, and then your regulatory. And then on the end of that, can the team actually deliver what we're intending to do? And that comes at the end as well. You learn to do a lot of this yourself as well. But with time, I've started adding people to the team or contractors we work with in different capacity who have that experience. So in essence, what started off as a built-in internalized process has now kind of become outsourced because of recruitment. So, what are the national guidelines? What is the regulatory approval process for this? What does the GMC say? What does the Royal College say? Now you start to move away from guidelines and more into opinion, which is still important as well, because end of the day, you need social proofing from your peers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Private healthcare can be intimidating, due to the cost. How do you position your pricing while still maintaining the perception and reality of value and trust?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously it's different based on the patient you're dealing with and also where they're coming in from. So for example, patients that come to us from the States, the price conversation is it's a lot quicker, let's call it that. There's very minimal thought process to make that decision because they're naturally primed to pay for healthcare. All right. It's how they're used to think. Where, in the UK, it's slightly different. There is a lot more justification needed. And so in terms of pricing, one thing we do avoid is price wars. So I regularly monitor all of the sort of websites of other clinics. What are people doing? What's going on? And what I've noticed, especially in the last 2 years, is a slashing of prices. Now, there comes a point where slashing your price with rising cost gets you to a point where it's no longer worth the effort from a effort business point of view. Now, obviously, you carry on doing it because you've got an obligation as a clinician. That puts pressure across the board. You've got to get more patients through the door, everything, and then it makes you less susceptible to any kind of unforeseen change, all right? So we avoid that. If anything, I actually raise prices as per inflation. And we're not talking about your 2% Bank of England inflation. We're talking about real inflation, which is in the range of about 10%. That's sort of how we approach it. Now, we keep our pricing scheme simple. Full price is what we offer patients if they want to go down the road of installments. We offer a heavy, healthy discount if they want to go down single payment. We installed that particular pricing scheme to just avoid having, a bit of a haggle about price. Some people enjoy it. Obviously, we don't. The price is the price. We're willing to budge a little bit, but we'll do so within a framework that we've set up now.
What systems or technologies have you implemented to ensure a smooth patient flow and optimal time management within your medical?
We've kept it reasonably low tech, but highly integrated. So what I've been working on over the last 6 months is customized API keys to let software that don't talk to each other talk to each other. Now, the objective of that is to minimize error, minimize data entry time, and allow for a lot more, and also standardized data entry. So, for example, 2 key points in terms of running a marketing campaign is what's your conversion rate and what's your ROAS. Well, those used to be a 3-day job for me, sitting down and calculating it. Now, with integration, it's basically become an hour job. So that's allowed us to very quickly modify, make changes, and understand where we are in real time. In terms of follow-up structures, where things sort of fall off at times is they've had the consultation with their consultant. There is a intention to proceed with some form of treatment, and then things don't happen after that. And that's related to your follow-up structure. So in order to counteract that, what we've done is basically create a custom automation, whereby the clinical notes that the doctor writes automatically populate a treatment plan. So there's a bit of AI that's used in this, and obviously it gets checked. And then once that treatment plan is created, you hit submit, and that will then notify via email all the different people involved in every step after that. So your booking team, your patient coordinator, your stock, things like that. So, everybody gets notified that we're going to proceed with this. What we've also added is the patient coordinator role. That is about 6-7 months old, which is a qualified, trained enough in ophthalmology to have a conversation with patients about risks and complications and what strategies are taken to mitigate that. And we do that either over the telephone, but vast majority is right after the consultation. And that's where we discuss, the treatment plan. That's, because what you want to do is lean into the objections very early on. People would avoid the objections. No. This is where the stumbling blocks may occur. Let's talk about them now. So your conversation about complications, side effects, things like that. What happens if you don't hit the outcome mark? What are the next escalatory steps? What does the financials of that look like? So the whole plan is laid out. And then at the end of that conversation, we discuss the pricing and deposit taking and booking in the provisional treatment date. So that's helped tremendously maintaining our follow-up structure afterwards.
What steps have you taken to build a professional but obviously still strong reputation online, where everyone's going to look at each other? Like, what steps have you taken to build that? So,
it's been this is sort of the curse of small businesses, so to say, but it's also the opportunity. So a fully comprehensive, across the board social media content creation and strategy with your website, blogs, all of that, that's quite an expensive proposition. And so at the beginning, we didn't have those funds. And so what ended up happening was I had to do quite a lot of it myself. Now, that was done by me. Obviously, I'm not trained in that. I'm a medic. So understanding that has been a 5-year process. We kind of started marketing and taking this aspect of the business a lot more seriously in COVID. And so now you're absolutely right. Right now, what we're currently doing is redeveloping the website. And this is the website's gone through like 3-4 versions. And it's usually whenever you switch over to a new marketing team, they modify and change the website based on what they're best at doing. I need to move away from that. And hence, that's why we're redeveloping the website. All of the online presence is now shifting to video, because that's a lot more how people receive information these days. Yeah, I mean, it's trying to stay where we can ahead of the curve of what are the new trends and how are people receiving information, and what, I don't like using the word viral, but what tickles the imagination, let's call it that.
what advice would you give to consultants trying to transition from hospital roles to building a private brand and practice?
Yeah, so what I always tell them is I always encourage them to learn marketing and sales early in the process. It just makes your life a lot easier later on. Understand the dynamics, understand all of that. And by extension, you start to understand the patient journey. So it all really comes down to put yourself in the patient's shoes and use language that speaks to that journey. That's really where it all comes down to. Another thing I always encourage them to do is find your niche. What makes you special? What makes you stand out? Is it a particular procedure that you do that you've trained? Whatever it is, it doesn't even need to be clinical, but find your niche and then pound home on that. That becomes the cornerstone of your marketing campaign, your sales strategy, even to a degree, your clinical approach where applicable. So finding your niche and taking sales and marketing very seriously. What I've noticed a lot of people doing, especially doctors, is heavy on the marketing, but no sales infrastructure. And, they'll say, I'm spending this much on that and this much on Google Ads, and all I've gotten is 5 leads. Okay, well, first of all, so it's understanding that process. And then if you try to do it all in one go, it's just not going to work. It's breaking down the entire patient journey into bite-sized touch points and laser focus down on each particular one. The wording you use, how easy is it to access you? Do you give them options on how to reach out? What is the material that you send them? What happens after that point? And then every point after that, the same approach of transparency, giving the information, being accessible to ask questions, because people make decisions at different paces. And understanding that point is really key, because we use a lot of the disc profiling sort of methods to not necessarily label our patients, but understand based on what we are close to assessing is what's their profile. And that directly informs purchasing habits, how they receive information. You give the information always the same, but it's how you word it based on who you're talking to. That I believe that comes later. That is sort of level 2, level 3. But I'd say level 1 is strong understanding of marketing, strong understanding of sales, having some form of rudimentary or basic setup for those two, and finding your niche is really key. Finding your niche doesn't necessarily need to be, you're a world-class specialist in this particular field. No, it's I speak Arabic and therefore I'm going to use that to attract Arabic-speaking patients because I understand the language and the culture and whatever it is.
What trends do you foresee in private medical practices in the UK, and how are you preparing your clinic to adapt to these changes over the next 2, 3, 4 years?
Yeah. So the trends I see coming down the road are a gradual transition. Okay, so for your main sort of ophthalmic private consultant, the main bread and butter is laser surgery and cataract surgery. Now, if you focus entirely on those, you're fluctuant and seasonal and susceptible to whatever changes the NHS makes as well. So what I'm seeing now is a lot more diversification of services being offered. What you're also finding is a rapid rush to expand to a multi-center model with the objective of selling it off. Now, I think that is, I wouldn't do multi-center in the UK. I'd do multi-center internationally just to help, push back on any kind of market fluctuation. So I see that. Now, I understand from their point of view, it's build a sellable asset and then trigger a sale. So I understand sort of the mentality of that, but then you need to ask yourself, well, who's buying? Is it attractive enough for them in the current marketplace? One trend that we've also started doing or change is focusing heavily on attracting international patients as well. So leveraging the Harley Street address, the UK expertise, the impression that UK healthcare still has across the world, especially, in areas, such as the Middle East, things like that, and building a framework of, well, we need a mechanism for B2C patients coming in and a B2B referral as well, locally as well. And that's where niche comes in, because if you've got your niche, let's say you do a particular treatment that a few select handful of doctors do in the country, fantastic. Then that becomes something you can leverage. We're seeing a lot more patients come to us now via insurance companies, which makes a lot more sense. Waiting times in NHS are getting longer. I mean, look, it depends who you talk to. Some people say shorter, some people say longer. And the rising cost of self-funded private healthcare is probably a step too far for some people. So they take the route of insurance. Now, that's been a big challenge because you've got 10, 15 different insurance providers out there, and understanding how you bill and what you're able to bill for is a task in its own right. So that would also be something I would also recommend to newer doctors starting off, is get your approvals with the insurance companies early, because it's a referral source, end of the day.
Absolutely. I want to say thank you so much for your time.